Hey Commanders fans, we're back with another hot video, straight from your team's off-season activities. And this one's a doozy, the kind that gets us fans all hyped up and a little nervous at the same time. We know Adam Peters and Coach Dan Quinn are working tirelessly to shape the team, bringing in new talent and fostering a healthy competitive environment. But not everyone can keep up, and it seems some players are already feeling the pressure in these early weeks of voluntary workouts. If you want to know who needs to turn up the heat and what it means for the future of our Commanders, stick with us until the end because we're going to break it all down. And of course, don't forget to like the video. It only takes a click and helps me out a ton. It's in this highly competitive environment that we start to see who's excelling and, unfortunately, who's falling behind. Any player who doesn't give their all, doesn't show the expected growth, or doesn't adapt quickly to Quinn's system and coaching staff risks being demoted on the depth chart, or worst case scenario, being cut altogether before the regular season begins. With all that in mind, and with the information emerging from the first voluntary workouts, we can already identify some Washington Commanders players who, at this moment, seem to be lagging behind in the 2025 OTAs. It's painful to say this as a fan because we root for everyone, but the reality of the NFL is this. It's a high-performance business, and those who don't produce fall behind. Let's start by talking about the running back room, which got pretty interesting with the offseason moves. The arrival of Jacare Kroski-Merritt, a 7th-round pick in the last draft, promises to shake things up at this position. He had a commanding start in the first workouts, showing speed and aggressiveness, which caught the attention of the coaches and, of course, increased expectations among us, the fans. Of course, we need to temper our excitement a bit. After all, these are just the first workouts without full contact. But the offensive MVP of the Shrine Bowl is undoubtedly a player to keep an eye on throughout the summer and during training camp. He arrived ready to work and is putting pressure on the other players at the position. Adam Peters remains confident that Brian Robinson Jr. can become an even more consistent threat in a crucial year for him as he's entering the final year of his rookie contract. Austin Ekeler arrived to be the reliable pass-catching option out of the backfield, a role our team desperately needed to fill, and Jeremy McNichols could also fight for a spot on the final roster after signing a new one-year contract, depending on how many running backs the team decides to keep for the regular season. Given this fierce competition, things don't look very promising right now for Chris Rodriguez Jr. The former 6th-round pick from Kentucky received an exclusive rights free agent tender this offseason, which prevented him from testing the market as a free agent. He deserved that tender after showing potential and running aggressively when called upon last season, but Kroski-Merritt's arrival and strong start make his situation more precarious than ever. Chris Rodriguez Jr. needs to focus on what he can control now. All he can do is perform well in the remaining workouts and training camp, show his characteristic aggressiveness, and adopt a physical approach in all phases of the game, whether running the ball or blocking. After that, his future will be out of his hands. But right now, a spot on the practice squad remains the most likely outcome for him, unless he manages to make a huge leap in performance. Moving on to the wide receiver core, we also have a player who needs to show more to secure a significant role, Luke McCaffrey. The Washington Commanders expect more from him in 2025, that's a fact. The team took it slow with the wide receiver in his first year as a pro, giving him plenty of reps in practice and game situations, but very few effective targets in games. That first-year experience should have been good for his development, giving him time to adjust to the speed of the NFL, but complacency is simply not an option for Luke McCaffrey now. The competition at the position has increased significantly, and he needs to show that he can take the next step and become a reliable piece in the offense. Luke McCaffrey has talent. We've seen flashes of it. He has good hands and has created separation against opposing defenders better than most expected from a rookie. There was also a lot to like about his ability in punt and kickoff returns, which showed incredible potential at the end of last season and throughout the playoffs. This versatility could be a positive point in his favor. However, he will need to prove his worth again this offseason, and the competition is fierce. The Washington Commanders traded for Deebo Samuel Sr. to provide Terry McLaurin with an elite running mate in the wide receiver room, a game changer. They also invested the 128th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft in Jalen Lane, who has many similar characteristics to McCaffrey but is considered much more explosive and elusive on the field. And Jalen Lane stood out early in his transition to the NFL, showing that the team's pick was a good one. The team's internal evaluations are extremely positive regarding the rookie, who arrived with everything and impressed in the first workouts. This puts the onus on Luke McCaffrey to improve his game accordingly to avoid being demoted on the depth chart and seeing the rookie pass him in the battle for snaps and targets. I believe Luke McCaffrey will be part of the final 53-man roster. His potential is too great to be waived in his second year, but what his exact role will be in the 2025 season is not yet defined, and it will depend heavily on his performance in the coming months and how he compares to Jalen Lane and the other wide receivers in terms of consistency and impact on the field. Now, let's talk about the defensive line, a position where Adam Peters never settles. The Commanders' general manager is extremely aggressive in the market, closely following league events, and of course, the performance of his own roster. Another example of this mentality happened shortly before the start of OTAs with the signing of defensive tackle Carl Davis. The imposing defensive tackle performed relatively well when given opportunities last season, showing that he can be a useful piece in the rotation. The Washington Commanders waited a long time, but finally concluded that Carl Davis was worth another evaluation to see if he could impact the defensive line rotation in 2025. This signing adds another experienced and competitive body to the position. This addition of another defensive tackle may not be good news for some of the players already here, competing for a roster spot. Even so, it's a small price to pay for the team's progress, as the Commanders seek to establish themselves among the NFL elite once again. Competition is healthy and raises everyone's level, but for some, it means that a roster spot has become even harder to win. Sheldon Day is someone who might be looking nervously over his shoulder with the arrival of Carl Davis and the overall competition at the position. Like Davis, veteran Sheldon Day proved himself when starting linemen were injured or needed rest in 2024. He showed he can be a solid player in the rotation, and that earned him a deserved new contract this offseason. But, as I said, there are no guarantees in the NFL, especially at a position as contested as our Commanders' defensive line. Sheldon Day needs to maintain or perhaps even increase his production in practice in the preseason to rejoin the final 53-man roster. But with Javon Kinlaw, Eddie Goldman, and now Carl Davis also vying for a prominent role in the rotation, the margin for error for Sheldon Day is extremely small. Looking at the current competitive situation on the defensive line, with the arrival of experienced players and the fight for every snap in practice, Sheldon Day has a real uphill battle ahead of him if he wants to secure his roster spot. He will need to show that he is indispensable and that he can contribute more than others to justify his place on the main team. Now, a name that generated quite a bit of discussion among us, Commanders Nation, and who also seems to be falling behind, or at least sending the wrong message, is cornerback Marshon Lattimore. There were some notable absences from the team's organized activities, and his was one of the most talked about, and in my opinion, one of the most worrying. We know that Terry McLaurin was absent while awaiting a lucrative contract extension, which is understandable for a player of his caliber. Laramie Tunsil also didn't attend, which may also be related to his current contract, as there's no financial guarantee after the 2025 season. These absences, while not ideal, have clear explanations related to the financial and contractual aspects. But Marshon Lattimore also chose to prepare away from the team, and this was undoubtedly the most controversial issue among the fans, especially considering the somewhat indifferent contribution of the cornerback last season, even with the mitigating circumstances associated with his injury. As a fan, seeing a player who arrived with so much expectation not be present at voluntary workouts worries me. The Commanders gave up a considerable amount of draft capital to acquire Lattimore via trade with the New Orleans Saints before the 2024 trade deadline. This was seen as the arrival of that elite coverage presence that was missing in Washington, someone who could make a considerable impact and help our secondary improve dramatically. The expectation was that he would be a shutdown corner. Unfortunately, that didn't happen last season, largely due to a hamstring injury that never seemed to fully heal. Lattimore was only a shadow of his former self. The former Ohio State player, who was always known for not giving up on a challenge on the field, had his performance clearly limited by the physical problem. The Washington Commanders are giving him another chance to establish himself as the team's primary cornerback when he is fully recovered and ready to play. But the absence from OTAs, even though they are voluntary, only sends the wrong message to the fans and perhaps to the coaching staff itself. It shows a lack of urgency or commitment that doesn't match his situation and what the team invested in him. It's true that the former first-round pick has enough experience to hit the ground running when he arrives at Washington's mandatory minicamp, which is the next step in the offseason calendar. He knows how to prepare. But make no mistake, the pressure to produce in 2025 is enormous. Lattimore needs to show that he's still the player we saw in the Saints before the injury, and that he's fully committed to the Commanders' project. Finally, going back to the wide receiver room, which, as I mentioned earlier, has fierce competition for spots. The best players, those who show the most in practice in the preseason, will make the final roster. Past achievements don't matter as much as what they can do for the Washington Commanders' chances in 2025 and potentially in subsequent seasons. We already have names practically guaranteed on the roster. Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel Sr., Noah Brown, Jalen Lane, and Luke McCaffrey. Although his role is still up for grabs, his roster spot seems secure for now. This leaves room for perhaps one more option if the Commanders decide to keep 6 wide receivers for the Week 1 game against the New York Giants. Michael Gallup is currently ahead in this competition, but there's a new unknown involved after he spent a year away from the league due to retirement. KJ Osborne is another player who believes in his chances of making the team and competing for that last spot if the team keeps 6 wideouts. The Commanders claimed him off waivers after a Noah Brown injury that required kidney surgery at the end of the 2024 season. He was an emergency option at the time and didn't see much action, arriving late in the season. However, those in power on the team want to see what KJ Osborne can offer with a full offseason to delve into the schematic concepts of our offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. This is his big chance to show that he can be more than just an emergency option, and that he has value for the offense in 2025. But, considering the performance of players like Deebo Samuel, Jalen Lane, and Michael Gallup in the first preseason workouts, who showed very positive flashes and seemed to be a step ahead, KJ Osborne's quest to make the team represents a significant challenge. Unless he seizes every opportunity that comes his way, shows consistency, and some notable highlights in practice in the preseason, he may have to look for another job sometime before the start of the regular season. That's the harsh reality of the NFL, Commanders Nation. The competition is relentless, and every practice, every rep, every preseason game counts. These 5 players we've mentioned here are under the spotlight, needing to show more to secure their place or a relevant role on the team. We, as fans, can only hope they turn up the heat and show their best football. And now, I want to know your opinion, Commanders Nation. After seeing that some key players and others vying for a roster spot are apparently falling behind in OTAs, who do you think has the best chance of turning things around and surprising everyone in training camp? And which of these players worries you the most about their future on our team? Leave your comment below. Let's discuss these fierce battles for roster spots. And if you don't want to miss any details of this fight for a spot in the sun on our Commanders and want to closely follow the evolution of our team, like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. Your subscription and your like greatly help us to continue bringing you the news and analysis that you, a true fan, deserve. To conclude, with competition heating up in the Washington Commanders offseason activities and some players already struggling to keep up, the big question that remains in the air and that only time and on-field performance can answer is, will these players who are falling behind be able to find an extra gear, overcome the challenges, and secure their place on the roster and in the rotation? Or is the intensity of Coach Dan Quinn's new regime already defining who will be part of the victorious future we so much dream of for Commanders Nation?